Are there any sort of main aspects of your work that maybe I don't know about, or that you just want to bring in? Like, what would be something that's kind of key to your orientation that you want to bring in here?
I mean, I think one of the most exciting things right now is Biotensegrity. It is absolutely the most exciting thing that we've got going in the movement education world. And I'm really happy to say that, you know, at this point, the work that the Soma Kinney School does is Biotensegrity informed. And yeah, it's been an amazing few years, really beginning to unpack this complex system science and move from classical anatomy and biomechanics thinking into biotensegrity.
Okay, do you want to, I've come across this a little bit with some of the fascial people we've had on the show, but do you want to briefly explain the difference between a kind of classical model and a biotensegrity model of human structure?
Yeah, the way I think about it is that, you know, for what, probably the past 300 or 400 years, this, you know, classical biomechanics and anatomy has really developed because of how we've seen the way we make things and structures in our world, our buildings, our machines, our cars. Mm-hmm. It's like we see the way mechanics works successfully out here in hard matter physics in the physical world, and therefore we've determined that that is in fact how we are organized as well.
So you see a building and you go, okay, they put bricks on top of bricks, it's compression forces. That must be how a human skeleton works, because there's a house and houses stand up tall.
Exactly. And so there's really been a science crafted, an evidence-based science crafted that has started from what we do out in our world, and then to understand our human body has then applied that kind of mechanistic thinking. But, you know, we are living, we're life, we're soft matter, which means that essentially we can, the way our bodies respond is time dependent and force dependent. It's adaptable in the moment. It's responsive. So you know, my house that I'm in, I push the wall, it doesn't change the other structural bearing points. So, you know, biotensegrity is essentially this science that's looking at understanding our living anatomy. So for example, like you mentioned, we're not compression structure. And we know this. Anybody who thinks about the spine as a compression structure will soon realize, oh, well, then how come I can do this?
Yeah.
You know, what's happening there?
For the podcast listeners.
Yeah, for example, right? So, you know, so what I would say about it is, the other thing I'll say about it, biotensegrity also makes a lot of sense in terms of its outlining principles that can be applied at every size scale, from the organelle inside of a cell all the way to the organism. And it doesn't just describe us, it describes all of life. So these are really nature's principles. And it's interesting to think that we've developed an anatomy and a biomechanics model that has not aligned with the principles of nature and the rest of life.
So just what is biotensegrity then? So it's biological tensegrity. Do you want to explain that?
You know, it's described different ways. The way I like to talk about it is it's structural design principles that are applied to our living architecture and our function and our form.
And this idea of tensegrity particularly, I mean, rather than the sort of compressive analogy of bricks, you know, stacking up on a building, in some sense of, how would you describe that part?
So the kind of the grandfather, I've heard him called before, Dr. Stephen Levin, who really coined the term biotensegrity, orthopedic surgeon of 40, 50 years or something like that. And he is the one who looked at the tensegrity models and the tensegrity architectural designs through Buckminster Fuller and Fuller's student Kenneth Snelson, and started looking at that model and going, oh, okay, that makes more sense in terms of biological organization than the compression structure of this building over here. And so taking the ideas from the tensegrity model and applying them to biological living being, he coined the term biotensegrity. Got it.
Thank you. Thank you. And aside from the geek factor, which I can see is high, and I respect that, it's not a why is this exciting?
Okay, so I've talked about how I'm a bridge person. And you mentioned like that's where we're the same, right? So one of the bridges that I've been really wanting to make in movement education is between, here's the experience I have as a moving self, and then here's the evidence-based science that tells me about how this moving self is organized. And I've been looking to find, I'm always looking for the rationale and the science. I'm very big on the experience that I'm having and the relationship and the outcome that happens from exploration. I also want the science. I want the rationale. I want to find it. So Biotensegrity takes away the discrepancy, Mark. It literally is the bridge between the self I experience in movement and this organization that I intuit and experience through through all of the many ways that I've moved and what I have learned from myself. And then also the principles of organization that we can look at objectively. It's the bridge between the two. There's no discrepancy. It's always been a discrepancy for me. I mean, I've been teaching anatomy and biomechanics for years. You know, I've taught in personal training schools, I've taught in universities, and there's always a way that I would keep certain things out. Why am I going to teach levers? Levers doesn't do anything for us. It doesn't help me at all as a movement teacher to understand levers, and it doesn't make any sense. So I always kind of went more towards the structural kinesiology, again, form and function, and how we can relate this to what we feel inside as an organized self and what I can see from the outside in terms of assessment. Biotensegrity takes away the discrepancy between the two.
Nice, nice. The bridge, the suspension bridge between the two.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other sort of major chunks of your work that we haven't touched upon yet that you think I should speak about that if I'm on the Embodiment Podcast?
I would say, just speaking more to this vision, Mark, of just being very called to co-create with other movement teachers a new movement education model. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the kind of the word that's arisen in the community as I've been teaching online over the past 2.5 years now has been embodied movement science. Here's embodied in yet another way, but it's just this idea that we've been speaking to. It's like, how do we as teachers really take this knowing of the subjective, like the personal consciousness, this kind of somatic inquiry and everything that emerges and comes from this knowing, and then all of the science that's out there that's telling us about how to teach movement and what function, what's good function and what's poor function, and how to create adaptation and, you know, to help people out of injury and all these things. So we don't have a movement education model yet that quite speaks to the combination of the arts and the sciences. So that's what we're building in intelligent motion training. And it's really exciting work. And, you know, any movement teacher that's interested in really diving into that framework, they'll find it at the Somatic School.
Okay, so in terms of people looking for you online, that's Somatic, S-O-M for Mark, A, Kines, K-I-N for November, E-S-E, school. .com.
Well, it's, yeah, you can go to somakines.com. My main website is kailajune.com. I haven't changed over that handle, but on Facebook and Instagram it is Somatic School.
Oh, there we go. So this is where I was getting confused. So I came from kailajune.com and it's also there. Okay, good, cool. I find myself running out of steam today, which is absolutely nothing to do with you, because this has been interesting and fun. I think I've just hit a wall today energy-wise, so I want to kind of wrap up before I just start nodding and lose the ability to talk intelligently. So anything here to finish up, Kaila?
I appreciate you having me on the podcast, Mark. This is what it's all about for me, is connecting, relating, learning from new people, and you know, continuing to evolve this work for the greater good of humanity and beyond.
There we go. Nice. And I do recommend your online classes. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mark.